like any good origin story, it's all about context and superheroes. So, without further ado, context. Warner Bros. Discovery has collectively 130 years of collective expertise in producing and delivering original content, from superhero films to the Olympics. And this expertise is delivered to the big screen, the screens in your living rooms, and the smallest screen in your hand, often the smallest room in the house, by superheroes in the business. So I just wanted to get the context for this presentation and what we're talking about. It's about the superheroes behind the scenes and how we support them. Now, what me and my team do, and some of my team are sitting over there, is we empower and enable those superheroes behind the scenes to make sure the content gets delivered to your screens when you expect it. So a little bit about me and Josh. My name is Emerson Friedman. I'm the Senior Director for Service Architecture at Warner Bros. Discovery. Basically, me and my team make sure that the business runs by looking for blockers, problems, challenges, pain points, and finding solutions, often for, the smallest problems. So we start small. And we work with not just our colleagues in the business and our customers and our stakeholders, but also with key suppliers like RapDev.
Thank you. So I'm Josh Van Harn. I work for RapDev. For those that don't know RapDev, RapDev is a ServiceNow Elite partner. We started in work around making ServiceNow work in a cloud-native environment. From there, we've progressed to things like automation, creative discovery in the cloud, but also on-prem, and making technology work with an engineering mindset, which led us to this Connect.
So again, context. The point of this origin story is a discussion about getting the digital teams into the CMDB. Now, if anyone is CMDB friendly, you know it's not the most exciting subject, and it's definitely not the thing that digital teams want to talk about or want to get involved in voluntarily. The pressure to get D2C or direct-to-consumer, just to clarify, sorry, I'm using acronyms, and if I use acronyms that don't make sense, please stop me. Direct-to-consumer, who build Discovery Plus as one of the platforms, and manage it, and develop it, and deliver it, and oversee it, they work in the DevOps world, Agile. And to avoid making Agile fragile, we don't dictate to them how they work or the tools they work in. It's not our business to do that. They have to work as effectively and efficiently as they can. Now, information security and the TOC, or the Technology Operations Center, who manage major incident management, monitoring, observability, response, security incident response for large events like the Olympics and live sports playout. They're quite a critical operational team. Now, both InfoSec and the TOC wanted all of the digital content that Discovery Plus is made up of, all of the components, the SDLC components, the software delivery lifecycle components, in the CMDB, so that if they had an alert or an issue, or an information security alert, or a SecOps issue, they could find the information through their normal processes, bring the right teams together to support and respond and resolve those issues, and then be effective and efficient. So before Discovery Plus launched to 2021, we were asked to put the components for Discovery Plus, the digital components, into the CMDB. So ignoring all the details and the complexity of that, and I'm not going to bore you with it, basically, we did that. We put it into the CMDB. Maybe we kind of, by hook and by crook, got it in there. Maybe we didn't follow all the CSDM models that you're supposed to follow because of the version we had of ServiceNow at the time. But we got it in, and that was a success. But immediately, InfoSec and the talk wanted to have that information up to date. So here's where our superheroes met their first arch nemesis, time. The D2C team cannot go into ServiceNow and update thousands of microservices and business applications and the relationships and the tags manually. It's just not possible. So we brought in ServiceNow, who brought in RapDev.
And with that bringing in, we ultimately wanted to show together with ServiceNow that we could do direct discovery from cloud resources with zero wait time, so event-driven, that we could help them make sure that the CMDB is up to date with zero overhead, and also add components around being able to define services from development directly into production without having any delay in how that information gets there, and make sure it stays up to date through actions on the development side and not through admin or operations.
So what does that mean? Josh, do you want to explain how the now.yaml solution works?
Of course. So to zoom in on that last piece, so the basis for this obviously is working discovery, right? Where data is coming into your CMDB. If it's cloud, it has the right tags, it has the right information, and you've done the groundwork to make sure it's aligned. So what we do at that point is we create something in now.yaml, which is just a definition. That definition allows developers directly from their repo to define that this repo is for this microservice or these sets of microservices. And this is their definition. These are their owners, these are the assignment groups, this is the reference values, this is the enterprise architecture, whatever you want to put in there. They put it in there, they control it, we pick it out of that repo, and we create the relationships, we create the application service, and we create the tag-based application service or services for those microservices. So the microservices now exist, Discovery pulls in the resources and automatically builds that service map. So the definition, as you see here, basically CSDM4 compliant. All the components can be defined in that configuration file, if you will, and absorbed with zero manual touch.
And what was one of the challenges we bumped into about, because obviously in layman's terms, the now.yaml goes to the DevOps module in ServiceNow and then gets ingested in the CMDB through some magic. But the challenge there is the DevOps teams don't sit in ServiceNow. And they need to know that that now.yaml ingest worked. So there was a need for event-driven feedback.
But yeah, so the design here and what we extended, because this is basically RapDev IP or technology, is that we then allow them to tie it back to a feedback loop if it's initially a basic email, but then tie it into things like SNS, where they can then programmatically decide how to respond to results of ingestion. So success, failures, reason of failures, which would allow them, and we're not at this stage, but it will allow them to then programmatically define how to respond to these failures. Alert someone, redo it, resubmit it, pause a pipeline, whatever they want to do based on that response.
So it sounds really simple, right? Really slick and easy, just
Super simple.
Plug and play. We did a POV of this with the digital teams, and it worked, right? We did a lovely POV, ServiceNow and RapDev, and 4 months of waiting. No, sorry, it was a lot of back and forth. It's hard to get people who are very busy all the time to sit down with you in meetings and talk about stuff they're not necessarily excited about. But we got there. And we had a solution. So we had a now.yaml file, which told the developers they could sit in GitHub and they could populate this file with all of the information about all the business applications and the relationships and the tags and the microservices, and it would ingest and build this lovely model, right? No, because we started a project. We went from POV to project. And in that project, this is tangential velocity. I love the picture. It works. I'm afraid there's mathematicians here, so I'm not going to pretend I know what it means, but I just like the image. During the project, we realized that it wasn't enough to have one version of the YAML file. You want to elaborate?
Yeah, definitely. So as I explained, the ability to define your microservices, what's in your repo, and how it's supposed to relate, was met with levels of maturity within that DTC, that digital organization. So some of them said, no, we have controls in place where in ServiceNow terms, the business application needs to pre-exist. We keep it in a Google Doc file, and that's how we track this stuff. So what we took is we then took that information and moved it into the CMDB, and we introduced a second version, which we called the governed version of this now.yaml, where we reduced the levels or degrees of freedom for those teams that are subject to that governance. So they can then, all they have to do at that point is define, this is my microservice, this is the business application, we receive it, and we can from there automatically already see the right tag of the microservices. We generate it based on the tag for the environment. So if it's a production environment for microservice ABC, we can automatically create the appropriate tag-based application service and start collecting the infrastructure and functions that relate to it. So now we have two versions, one for ungoverned or unstructured or lesser mature, and one for highly governed or more mature environments within the same organization.
But two wasn't enough, was it?
That's right. So the third version that we ended up with, this is iterating through, right? And this is important to make sure that you listen to what is needed on that business side and solve for it, was that there are still pieces that are basically monolithic. They weren't microservices, but they existed in a repo. We still want to be able to define those. So the third version actually just aligns to that, where we don't assume it's a microservice, but you can define it as an application service with the same relationship to the business application, with the only exception is that we take out components like the SDLC component, that is new in CSDM4, that we obviously don't populate and maintain those in the same file.
So it wasn't just challenges with the now.yaml file. I thought this was quite slick. It's a red light, turn right. On red, turn right, right? No, it's got a green light, as Josh pointed out. It's actually red, green, turn right, so I gave up. I couldn't find one. So basically, the point is, the now.yaml file obviously plugs into existing components that ITOM Discovery, so we're rolling out ITOM Discovery as well, horizontal and vertical service mapping, including AWS and Kubernetes. Now, part of Discovery Plus sits on Kubernetes, part of it. And to map Discovery Plus, which was one of the deliverables for the program that we're running, we had to get Kubernetes. But the digital teams got very twitchy when we said we're going to put a mid server in their Kubernetes environment. So because of that twitchiness, we then decided we'd approach another part of the business in Poland, TVN, and they agreed to let us capture their Kubernetes environment. And not only that, but they partnered with us, and they're monitoring the impact of standing up a mid server, running the scans, and the impact of the Kubernetes environment, and they're going to sit with us and the digital teams and have a tech conversation, which Josh will understand, and I'll just daydream because it'll be well beyond my technical capabilities. Sure. But basically, the lessons here are that we assumed that we knew what the problem was. So there are superheroes in InfoSec and TOC who needed the information in the CMDB to be able to do their job. And we got the information in. And then we assumed that getting that information in and automating, updating it would help the D2C teams, which is a fair assumption. What we didn't know is we didn't talk to D2C about what they actually wanted the file to do until we got into the project. And that became 3 versions of the file. And we didn't talk to the D2C team about how comfortable they are with us standing up a mid server in their Kubernetes environment. So all of the blockers, all of the changes of direction were a planning issue, or a conversation issue. And that kind of brings us on to the next point, which is, what are the lessons learned? First of all, it's obvious. We all know, focus on pain. We thought we knew what the pain was. We thought the pain was to save them the arch enemy of the time, arch nemesis, to save them time of updating ServiceNow, low touch, no touch. We pull it straight from their GitHub repo, build the microservices, ingest back, send the events back. But that's not what they wanted. They wanted 3 versions of now.yaml. And they wanted reassurance that the Kubernetes environment's not going to get knocked over by standing up a mid server in it and running scans. Yep. So,
yeah, and I think even taking that one step back to focus on pain, I think the lesson here is as well, forgive me Emerson, but is up front, be open to your conversation with your digital teams, right? Don't assume that you know what they're working on or where their actual pain is. Have the open conversation. You might have a need, your SecOps tells you need to put stuff in your CMDB, but find common ground first. Understand what they're doing, learn what they're trying to achieve, and incorporate that. And that is the pain you primarily focus on. That allows you to start collaborating with these teams if you don't have the connect, or to improve or deepen that relationship and find the quick wins, the things that they benefit from and they see the value from. Like the transition from their Google Doc into ServiceNow as business applications and exposing that over API so they can programmatically interact with it is a very simple step, but allows them more control, more understanding, and more future enhancements when they start doing SRE capabilities that need to understand what business applications and relationships exist. So talking first and then following through is how you identify their pain, identify quick wins, and then go into how do we incrementally support these things going forward, right? Look at your MVPs, don't go full scale, build something, put it out there, learn and improve.
Well, also adding to that, the continued engagement is key, because as we developed our conversations with the digital teams, we started getting those eureka aha moments from them. So I had a conversation with a technical project manager from the D2C team, and he was talking about in showing the data he wanted to load, and he was showing the AWS compliant tag dashboard that they run. And he was saying, I can load the compliant AWS tags. And I said, no, you can load all of them. Load the non-compliant ones too, and instead of trying to manage it outside, set up certification on those fields, on the CIs, and the system will chase your people to update the tags against the components that they own. And he's like, why aren't we doing that? So it's not just about, again, it's a cycle. We have a relationship, we build the conversation. And like the event management piece, the event management feeding back, the now.yaml ingest success or failure, like the conversation about what they do and don't want to use and what's valuable, it's about building the relationship and about having that governance in place. Because now there's a solution with now.yaml that partially sits inside the DevOps world, which we can't own. And if they want to change the now.yaml, if they want to add new functionality or feed new information in, they have to drive that. And there's a part that sits inside the platform team because it feeds into the DevOps module, right, into the CMDB. And there's a part that sits inside the service configuration management team. So now we have a three-way conversation between teams that might or may not work together across the business. And that's that whole lovely ITIL4 co-creators of value piece, which I love. I want to get in there. Sorry, I can't help myself. So, I mean, that's basically the whole spiel. We were told where we shouldn't go to questions.
We can do, yeah. So I'll do one more on Engage, right? So just as a learnings of what you discover when you work with digital teams is a great example where initially, like you got it from this story as well, there's some resistance on what's the value on declaring everything up front. I have monitoring, I have an understanding of what's happening in a live environment. And through those conversations, we also touched on things like you can now declaratively define what the relationships are. This is your application architecture, if you will, your microservices architecture that you agreed. You can now use that information also to compare to what you see in production, what the monitoring information, what the live streams are, and start seeing things like architectural drift, right? So you can now use this in the future, because they're not there yet, but in the future they can start building on these things to better understand what happens on the application side, to earlier detect deviations from where they want to be, and actually use that to be a better dev, like feedback, create a good feedback loop where they can start using that data in many different ways. So there are opportunities aplenty out there, but it requires conversation and continued engagement with these teams. So if you're IT, open up. Digital is not your enemy, right? They are the business that help you get into that next step. So open up and have that conversation. And reverse, if you are in digital, IT has capabilities, has experiences that can help you move faster or be more mature faster, and therefore drive more value for your business outcomes. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.